How are you guys doing? How are you guys doing? It's good to see. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but which sounds like incidentally we're about to talk about John Kirby here. But there we go. We've got 250 people slowly milling in. So please make sure you guys have hit the like button, and please let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I was just digging up a clip of Kirby where he's talking about Sudan. Okay, so actually let's dive right into that. Give me a second. Right, so I kind of wanted to bring you up to speed on what's happening in Sudan because well, there's still fighting, but in the last couple of days, the Americans, they sent their SEAL Team 6 down there and some other special forces. Now, I'll read you the Biden's mandatory letter to Congress in a second, but I thought I'd play you this clip of Kirby, who you know, he used to be the Pentagon spokesperson. Now he's the National Security Council's spokesperson. So listen to what he had to tell CNN.
I would just tell you that the universe of American citizens that have expressed a desire to leave and a willingness to move on short notice is a very small number. And so
it's far
we
less
really
than the
believe that these ground
16,000
routes,
estimated to be there, John?
Incredibly far less than that. Much less than that.
Can you give me an estimate?
Again,
like
I think it's important to remember most of those 16,000 that you've seen, first of all, that's an estimate. Most of them are dual nationals. They grew up in Sudan. They got family members in Sudan that are not dual nationals and they don't want to leave. I'm hesitant to give you an exact number, but it's very small. It's in the many dozens of a kind of a number. Okay. And so because that population is so small, right now we're focused on making sure that they have access to information to get on these ground routes. Plus, some of our allies and partners, some of the ones you just mentioned, Kate, are willing to open up some seats on their planes for other foreign nationals, including Americans, and so we're providing that information to them as well. That may be another way to get out. But look, the ceasefire is working, but it's tenuous. We want to also be mindful of that.
Right, so you can see Mr. Kirby's slightly uncomfortable because the special forces came to rescue the diplomats, and they left everybody who's well, I mean, whether they're dual national or not is kind of irrelevant, but they left everybody else behind. You know, the 16,000 Americans, give or take. Now, you know, when I first heard that figure, I was like, is that correct? 16,000? And then, you know, the estimates for this figure come from people who, as Kirby mentioned, are dual nationals, and then the rest of them are working, for example, in U.S.-funded aid organizations and so on and so on. So yeah, give or take, the number's kind of irrelevant here. But yeah, there, you know, basically people are very angry with the State Department because they're not giving, you know, their own citizens much information. Never mind a ticket out of Sudan. Now, when Kirby says that most people don't want to go, I mean, I assume that's the case with most people to begin with, right? Of course, no one wants to be, you know, chased away by violence and so on. Fine, but let me just show you what Biden did here, because there's this question about whether the Americans are kind of using this as an opportunity to, you know, rescuing the diplomats as an opportunity to keep their troops there. I'm not so keen to say that's the case, but let's go through Biden's letter, because you guys know from 1973 and onwards, if he does send, you know, if the president does decide to use American troops for whatever reason, he has to submit a letter to Congress within 48 hours, and then they can authorize that further or choose not to. So here's what Biden wrote to the Speaker of the House, and he said that he used U.S. Armed forces to conduct an operation to evacuate U.S. personnel from Khartoum, from Sudan's capital, and they were deployed to Djibouti, to Ethiopia, and Sudan. Now, you should keep in mind, in Djibouti, they already have a huge base there to begin with. So, I mean, he's just putting that under the umbrella of this rescue operation. Now for Sudan, you know, some people are thinking, well, is this a good cover to slip in a few special forces squads? I mean, yeah, it certainly would be, hypothetically, but do you think the Biden administration were just kind of waiting around for some, you know, diplomatic, some evacuation crisis of diplomats until they could do that? They don't care about these things, man. They really don't care. You know, if they wanted to put people in Sudan, they would just put people in Sudan, and you wouldn't even know about it. I know this is the law he's supposed to tell them. Yeah, guess what? They don't abide by them. Okay? So, if you want to look at most of Africa, I mean, the way that this has been defined is kind of loosely, you know, when we talk about military attaches, the threshold is quite low. It's 10 people, right? So if you took a map of Africa and you try to map out where the United States' bases and where they have military attaches and military personnel with 10 or more people, then it's most of Africa. It'll be 50 countries, right? Now, again, you have to keep in mind, these are the declared ones. So these are all of the ones that don't fall under classified or secret programs, okay? So the number could be and would be, my guess, much higher. Now, going back to Sudan, just so we're focused on Sudan, like I told you, the Americans, they already have an operation going on in Djibouti, which is just next door, which is in the Horn of Africa. You kind of know more or less what they've done in Somalia, because I've brought that up time and time again. They destroyed it, you know, and with Sudan, it's a different situation. I don't think you can compare it to Somalia. Somalia is really a different case, but when it comes to Sudan, I mean, you do have this situation where you have Dagalo on one side, and who was also called Hemeti, and he's, you know, it's a power struggle with Burhan. That's really what the situation is. Now, who the Americans are backing, I think that's anybody's guess, because and the Israelis too, you see, because there's there's a big gold rush that's happening in Sudan, you know? And I told you guys when I did my big breakdown video about Sudan and why this fighting is happening, is that one of the guys we're talking about, Hemeti or Dagalo, is a businessman. He's a businessman, you know? Yes, he was close with the old president, with Bashir, and he you know, headed these and still does head the RSF, the Rapid Strike Forces, but primarily, you know, and at his roots, this guy is a hustler. He's went from, you know, farming to being a general and having his own private army. He has a lot of money, and there's lots of money to be made. So you're going to have other countries like Russia, like, you know, for example, the Israelis who are interested, let's say foreign parties, right, that are interested in making money from the gold mines, which are still, you know, which are, like I told you, it's a gold rush. It's not over. And they're going to try and, you know, whoever's easier to deal with, they're going to go with him. But one thing I told you to keep in mind, when not in terms of business, but in terms of, you know, geopolitics and the location of Sudan, which is, you know, by definition, a very, very strategic, is the Red Sea base that you know, both sides had said okay to 2 months ago. So if you look at it from that point of view, who stands to gain from this kind of mess? Well, yeah, I guess you could say it's the Americans and NATO and so on. Doesn't necessarily mean that they, I mean, look, whether they started it or didn't start it doesn't change the fact that they stand to gain from it, right? So just if you look at it from a point of view, from a question of who stands to gain, it's definitely them, because one of the key points of this agreement was that the Russians understood this, and both sides that are fighting in Sudan understood that the Russians can only get this base once there's a government formed. So now any fighting is going to cause a delay in a government being formed, and there's already been a delay of several years. And yeah, the Americans stand to gain from that. But just going back to this question of the troops that they've sent in. No, I don't think that this is some kind of plan by the Americans to smuggle in some troops. No, they can do that anytime they like, and this is just a standard evacuation operation, which you've seen them do in Lebanon in 2006. Or I guess the more recent one would not be 2006, but in Kabul in Afghanistan, with the helicopter coming on, landing on top of the embassy, the Chinook. And they did one also in Somalia, incidentally, because we were talking about Somalia. I think it was in 91, right? So yeah, they do these things all the time. And I think in 1991 they even happened to be carrying the Soviet ambassador, back then Soviet, right? So they're saying there's a ceasefire now. I mean, you guys remember the first couple of days they tried doing 3 and 4 of them, and those ceasefires didn't hold. So again, I would say it's far from fixed for now, unfortunately, because at any moment's notice it can go back to fighting. But let's put that to rest and move on to something else. Speaking of embassies, I think I'll go with this one. We'll start with this one, because this is really something. I mean, you don't see this one every day, yeah? You don't see this story every day. Okay. So the Polish government basically just stole a bunch of money from the Russian embassy in Warsaw, right? And they've been screwing with the Russian mission there for over a year now. Here, this is the story from Reuters, right? So Polish prosecutors seized significant amounts of money from the frozen bank accounts of the Russian embassy and trade mission, according to the Russian ambassador. Okay, so he said that it's a flagrant violation of the Vienna Convention, etc., which I'll get to in a second. And here they make mention that Poland blocked the accounts shortly after Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, on the basis that they could be used for money laundering or terrorist finance. I mean, come on, that's kind of funny, man. But yeah, they did that exactly around the time where they kicked out 45 Russian diplomats, right? Or should we say employees of the embassy. So technically not every single one was a diplomat. But so just let me show you this story back then, because it's so funny reading it again. So they say here last week, keep in mind, this is in February 2022, so last year, okay? So the Polish government ordered 45 employees of the Russian embassy to leave the country within 5 days. The Russians, under diplomatic cover, were to carry out espionage activities in Poland, creating intelligence networks of contacts and informants and sending the information they gained back to their country. Yeah, no shit, that's called an embassy. What do you think an embassy is? An embassy is a nice way of saying a spy station. Of course they're spying. Man, half these people, you'll have, and this applies to everybody, the Americans, the Polish, doesn't matter, right? You'll have some guy who's called what's the typical Irish name? Ivan? I don't know. But let's say you have John Doe, who's the cultural attaché at some U.S. embassy. The guy's CIA. There is no cultural attaché. This is a front title, okay? Yeah, they're spies. Of course they are. But they already knew that. This is just an excuse to kick them out, okay? So get this. They kicked out the 45 diplomats, spies, same thing. I'm being cheeky, obviously. Not every single diplomat is a spy, but you could say most of them are. And then they froze 2 million euros. Actually, when the Russians tried to withdraw 2 million euros, they then froze the accounts. Okay, so these accounts have been frozen for a year now, and now this week the Polish have actually emptied out the accounts and just stolen all of the money. I guess they thought no one would notice or something. I mean, this is really crazy because look, man, whether you agree with the Russians or you don't like the Russians, what the guy's saying here is correct, that this is a violation of the Vienna Convention. You can't go around, forfeiting, stealing, other countries' assets just because they're in your country. You can't go around doing this, man. They're saying that it's financing terrorism. I mean, this is a bullshit charge. This is just whatever they think they can rubber stamp it with. It's nonsense. So you know what's going on now? As soon as I read this, I was like, the Russians are gonna start taking the Polish and the Poles and their money over in Moscow. And I did a bit of digging, and that's exactly what's going on. So they are basically they are frozen the accounts of they've done the same thing to the Poles in Moscow. So it's just a matter of time when both countries run out of money. Well, I think we could say the Russians already ran out of money because it just got stolen, right? But it's just a matter of time until Poland also has no more money left to pay for their embassy in Moscow, and then they're just. I mean, what's going to happen here? Are they just going to confiscate the embassy grounds? Because Poland actually did that as well, right? So they said that the Russians were not paying for some recreational center, so it's adjacent to the embassy, but it's not actually the building where the Russian diplomats work, and they said that the Russians weren't paying rent. Well, yeah, there's no money to pay the rent anymore, I guess, so the embassy's probably next. I don't know, but this is a great way to cut off ties without formally doing it. If this is what you're trying to do, and I think this is, the Polish government is very anti-Russia, and again, people in Poland, they have, their reasons, historically speaking, and so on, but, because Poland really got screwed by the Nazis, and remember the Soviet German pact. When they invaded Poland, the plan was to slice it 2 ways. Mm-hmm. But I'm not talking only about that, but in any case, right now, in terms of Ukraine and Poland's position towards Ukraine, it's very pro-Ukraine and very anti-Russia. The thing is, though, just because you're very pro-Ukraine, you can't go around confiscating the Russian embassy's money and closing closing the grounds. I mean, come on. If that's the case, then everyone's going to start doing that. That's why you have these things in place like Vienna Convention, so you can't do these sorts of things. One of them, just as an example, is arresting a diplomat and saying, "Oh, he's a spy." Yeah, well, we know they're spies, but you can't go around doing that because then everybody would start arresting everybody, and this is a very big problem, right? The other thing is that when it comes to the accounts that they're talking about here, this is considered, amongst the physical properties, it's considered other assets amongst other assets belonging to the country. So it's not some bank account; it's a bank account that belongs to the Russian Federation and their diplomatic mission inside of Poland. And Poland is the host country. They're supposed to protect that mission, and vice versa. It goes both ways. You know, this kind of relates to what I was saying before with the military bases, right? Why is China trying to why is China putting a base in the Solomon Islands maybe sometime, and why do the Russians want a base in the Red Sea? It's because the Americans go around putting bases everywhere, and then the Russians and the Chinese, they start engaging in the same behavior. Not the same, you know, 800 versus 4 or 1 or 3 is not the same, but still it's the same kind of thinking, right? That may lead to a similar result. And then when you look at the prisoner swaps, you know, between Russia and the Americans, why do you think in some cases the Russians are suspected of giving these high sentences, like Brittany Griner, or the Marine who was swapped between. So the first was with Yeroshenko, and then with Victor Bout. Why do you think the Russians are suspected of giving these high sentences? Because the Russian citizens in American prisons, you know, they were kidnapped and rendered and given these huge sentences. So now the Russians got to do the same thing in order to get their own citizens back, right? So the point I'm trying to make here is that when you have somebody breaking the rules and behaving in this manner, sooner or later everyone is going to start doing the same thing, because they think that, well, if America is doing it, then it's acceptable to do that, and we have no choice but to do that, right? That's how you end up with other countries mimicking that behavior. And you could also talk about Ukraine as the same thing. You know, how many times did the United States and the United Kingdom break the UN Charter, and how many countries did they invade before, you know, they kind of signal to Russia that it's okay to do the same thing when you want? Yeah, or how many times did Israel ignore UN Security Council resolutions and annex, you know, Jerusalem and annex the Golan Heights before the Russians thought, okay, maybe we can do the same thing? When you don't respect the conventions and you don't respect the laws, then I mean, it's a free for all. You know, anybody can do the same thing now. And of course, you know, the reasoning behind Iraq and the reasoning behind Ukraine and all these things, they're completely different. But you know, when you look at it from the UN's point of view, you know, it's clear cut. And when you look at them from this Vienna Convention, from that point of view, between, okay, we're going to take your money and then we'll seize these embassy grounds. Okay, we'll take your money and seize your embassy grounds. It's never ending. It's never ending. And this is how you end up with, you know, rules that, well, why do you think no one respects the UN? Because because no one respects the damn rules. That you know, and then you end up with treaties and conventions that are worth nothing, unfortunately, that are completely worthless. In any case, you know, it'd be interesting to see how the people in Poland and Russia kind of, you know, work their differences out, because, you know, they are neighbors. They are neighbors, and sooner or later, you know, long after the Ukraine war is over, they have to, you know, they have to resume ties and work things out. So again, this sentence, this time from Reuters, is so ridiculous. Look at this. Of course they do. Of course they do, man. You know that. You already knew that when they checked in the country. Oh man, that's really funny. They write this like it's some kind of novel concept. Yeah, it's just the way it is, unfortunately, you know. All right, let me move on to another topic, guys. So Claudia's correcting me. She says that the building that the Polish government seized was actually a living building, so living quarters outside the embassy, and they seized that one last year. I might be confused then with this. Where did this recreation center come from? Maybe that's the one that the Russians seized from Poland. Let me double check that real quickly. Yes, yeah. So this is from Claudius Craig. It is from last year. I'm just trying to look into this. Well, they say it was a recreation center, and it was leased outside Warsaw by Polish authorities, and the Russians are saying there's no embassy staff there. I mean, you know, it doesn't really make a difference, I suppose, one way or another. Let me see here with. Christ, I've got some really cringy stuff for you. There's some really cringy stuff already, but I'll get to that in a bit. Let me go through the stuff that you know is actually not cringy and you know is actually good. This is good. So this is some good news for once. Here, Ukraine's Zelensky holds first war phone call with China's President Xi Jinping. So again, this is very good news because, you know, since the time that the war started, they haven't had any official contact that we know of, and it's very good because the Chinese are they're trying to continue their streak, you know, of being seen as the peacemaker. What they just did between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and they're trying to you know offer their help in other places and other conflicts. And so, you know, they're thinking that, okay, well, if they were able to get Iran and Saudi Arabia to kind of bury the hatchet, then maybe they can do the same thing between Russia and Ukraine. And they've put out a 12-point plan. We'll just take a quick look at it in a second. But let me play this clip of Zelensky talking about their call, okay?
Of course, I gave all the diplomatic and public and not public to President of China, to leader of China, and I want to speak with him because I had contact with him before full-scale war, but during all this year, more than 1 year, I didn't have, and I really wait when our teams will find the solution.
But no plans
yes.
at the moment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Would you invite him here to Ukraine?
Oh yes, we are ready. We are ready to see him here.
Here's another one. Here's another clip.
Говорив сьогодні із лідером Китаю. Це була тривала, доволі раціональна розмова. Про такі розмови зазвичай говорять, що вони відкривають можливості. Зараз є можливість дати нову енергію нашим відносинам України та Китаю. Є можливість застосувати політичний вплив Китаю, щоб повернути силу принципам і правилам, на яких має триматися мир. Україна та Китай, як і абсолютна більшість світу, однаково зацікавлені у міцності суверенітету націй та територіальній цілісності. У дотриманні головних безпекових правил, зокрема щодо неприпустимості погроз ядерною зброєю та розповсюдження ядерної зброї світом. Ми однаково зацікавлені, щоб ситуація навколо Запорізької атомної станції нарешті була повністю убезпечена і щоб атомні станції взагалі ніколи знову не використовувались заради військових цілей. А саме таке цинічне використання атомної станції Росія намагається зробити нормою. Дуже важливо, що Китай має однаковий з нами погляд на свободу мореплавства і торгівлі. Я поінформував пана Сі Цзіньпіна про наші зусилля щодо відновлення морського експорту продовольства. І я почув слова підтримки нашої Чорноморської зернової ініціативи, її подовження, а також підтримку наших гуманітарних зусиль, зокрема програми «Зерно з України». Звичайна суттєва частина розмови – це наші погляди на те, як можна відновити справедливий мир. Я представив українську формулу миру, її конкретні пункти. Ми домовились продовжити наші комунікації.
Right. So, he mentioned, and here you really have to give the Ukrainians some credit, because they had nuclear weapons at the end of the Cold War, and they decided to give them up. So, I mean, I think, there are other countries like South Africa who were developing a nuclear weapons program and decided to forego that before completion. But the Ukrainians actually had a lot of nuclear weapons and nevertheless decided to give them up. So, when Zelensky's talking about non-proliferation, he definitely means it. And he's, of course, now talking about the Zaporizhia nuclear energy plant. But, nevertheless, he makes some really good points. And everything that's happened now is that, within the span of a few days after him announcing this call and then it also being confirmed by the Chinese, here's what happened. So Zelensky invited Xi Jinping to visit Kyiv for talks, noting that they had contact before the war, but nothing since it began, yes. And they talk about here at this point that I've highlighted in yellow, they talk about the likelihood of China actually wanting the war to end. And I think this is, some typical, anti-Chinese nonsense where they try to make you think like, oh, the Chinese, they're unreasonable and they back everything that Russia wants and it's unconditional. And I think that's complete nonsense, because the Chinese, since the very beginning, their position is completely neutral, and they actually mean that. And you can look at this in a different area, which is the Israel-Palestine issue. The Chinese are also equally as neutral. Now, you can see that both in two different ways. You can say that, oh, by remaining neutral, they are helping the Russians or helping the Israelis or whatever. Or you can see it from the Chinese point of view, which is basically, we're not going to forego relations with anyone. Anyone who's interested in having relations with us, then that's good and fine. And I think they do genuinely mean it. But of course, you can also, we have to say that when it comes to Russia kind of opening itself towards the east and rerouting all of the oil through the east or the global south and turning away from the west, definitely the Chinese support that, because it's good for them as well. But it doesn't come out of disdain for the Ukrainians or the West or something like that. I don't think it's anything to do with that. In any case, I don't know why they try and inject this crap in there, but it's BBC, so let me show you what the Chinese are putting out. They've put out this 12-point plan. So for them, this is their way to try and stop the war, and you can find it on the their foreign ministry's website. I gotta be honest, I mean, the whole thing, it definitely seems it's like exactly like I just told you. It's very, very neutral. They don't blame anyone. It's just like, you need to adhere to the UN Charter. You need to adhere to these agreements on nuclear non-proliferation and safety. And they praise the only diplomatic things that are happening. For example, the grain corridor in the Black Sea. It's very, very Chinese. It's just straight up nothing but things that can actually be implemented, right? And and of course, they say that nuclear war. I mean, I don't know why this needs repeating, but I guess it does. They say that nuclear confrontation is unacceptable. Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. So it's pity not many people in the West understand that. Just to show you like the difference in mentality. On I'm not saying this was coming from Western officials. I mean, definitely in their policy making, but in the West, it's kind of like, well, what about a tactical nuclear strike? Maybe we can do that. It really says a lot. It really says a lot, and I don't mean that in a good way. But basically, the Chinese government, they've sent a special representative on Eurasian affairs to Kiev, to Ukraine, and Zelensky appointed a former minister as ambassador to Beijing. Okay, so that's what I meant when things are already moving since the call. So it wasn't just some some empty talk and oh well, we're engaging on things. No, they were actually trying to move forward on this stuff. Oh yeah, and they mention here exactly what I just told you, which is that the Chinese are trying to continue off of their hot streak. And I was joking too because the other day the Chinese also proposed mediating Israel-Palestine, that they should maybe not push their luck too much, press their luck. But obviously I'm being cheeky, and I don't know. I do feel that this is good because and it really says a lot, because the Americans should be doing this, right? The Americans should be doing this stuff. Britain should be behaving like this, but you don't see it. Look at the difference in policy. So for them, the Chinese, for them, the way of ending the war is you actually engage and you do it diplomatically. But the way to end the war in the West is let's send more weapons. You know why? Because there's money to be made. And all these companies are based in Britain, and they're based in North America. The biggest weapons companies, so BAE Systems, Raytheon, Northrop, etc. Because there's money to be made. Now, that doesn't mean the Chinese don't have, their own defense industry and so on, but it's in, you can't compare that. Just because the Chinese have a very capable and advanced military and a nuclear armed one, it doesn't mean that they try to provoke wars and forego diplomacy on purpose so that situations like this happen where there's money to be made. They don't, their way of making money is completely different, right? Their mindset on business and economic growth is not rooted in militarism, right? There's a big difference there. So the thing that's actually surprised me, I was not expecting to see Zelensky as optimistic or enthusiastic about this, because I was expecting him to kind of have the same bias against the Chinese as the BBC article, because that's kind of the mainstream thinking in the West. And I guess that's my mistake. I'm pleasantly surprised by Zelensky, and I'm happy to see the Chinese actually push this, because they've said many times before their foreign ministry and Xi Jinping, they've said things like this, but this is the first time you actually see them acting on it. And another thing that dawned on me, and again I could be completely wrong, but this could be the Russians who are pushing the Chinese because they're sick of the war, right? The Russians might be sick of the war, by their own account, right? According to the Russians themselves, this was supposed to be a special military operation, and it was supposed to last a couple of weeks, right? Now it's almost a year and a half, and yes, while this is, when we look at the economic changes, while this is a good opening for the global South and for BRICS Plus and so on, obviously, no one wants to be at war, and I think the Russians, what they were expecting is that was very different from what's actually happening, from what's actually transpired. You know, I really do think that they were convinced this was going to be over in a matter of weeks or days or something, and you know, they were mistaken if that's what they believe, because you know, this thing is taking its toll on everybody. So anyway, going back to my main point, it could be, I'm just saying, it could be the Russians who are pushing the Chinese to get this thing to get the ball rolling. You know, for many different purposes. Maybe because they think the Ukrainians will perceive a Chinese initiative as being more genuine than a Russian one for whatever reason. Maybe because they want to save face, right? Because it would be they would look weak or something. I mean, I don't know how you would look weak trying to stop a war, but okay. There are many reasons. There are many reasons that this could be the case. In any case, you know. Either way, it's definitely in the interests of everybody, Ukraine, Russia, China, and the whole world, that this thing stops as fast as possible. I do hope that they follow up on this thing and actually push for it the way that they were able to get this a feud, tension, you know, some people even say Cold War between Saudi Arabia and Iran stopped, because that is really quite a feat. That is really quite a feat. I don't think anybody expected that. That was really, really something difficult. I don't know, you know, how they managed to do it. But, you know, I in any case, we talked enough about that, and I went through it in detail a million times. But my point here is that credit to them, and, you know, credit to Zelensky and Xi Jinping. And I hope they actually meet face to face, because, you know, the way you speak much more differently when you're two leaders together than through delegates or through representatives and so on, right? Like, this thing is good, but for them to really maybe get some stuff done, they need to meet face to face. So yeah, I'll leave it on a positive note. That's that. Here, let me show you something from let me show you something from Pepe Escobar. So here he wrote something very nice here, very, very insightful, and he goes into detail on this, and you know, we're gonna take a look at it too. Give me a second. So you have 19 countries that have now applied to join what is known as BRICS. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, which is the economic powerhouse of the future, right? As some people like to say, and it certainly is. If you look at the proposed BRICS expansion, I mean, here this is just about 10 or 11 countries, but you can see that everybody is interested in this now, right? So Brazil, Argentina, they're talking about doing about adopting a non-dollar or common currency for trade. Okay, so that's yet to be determined whether it's going to be something new. Although, you know, they've talked about making a new one as opposed to using their own. Kazakhstan, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Algeria, many of these countries that are what you'd call global south, right? Or what was in the old days, they said third world. They want to join BRICS because these are really the countries that have shown themselves to be the strongest economically. And when you look at the ripple effects of the Ukraine war, what has happened is that you've had not only increased interest in becoming a BRICS or BRICS Plus member, but of course increased interest in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, in joining the alternatives to SWIFT, right? So the Chinese and Russians have their own alternative to SWIFT, which is the financial messaging system. And you know, Pepe Escobar, he wrote a very good piece here, so I thought we'd go into it together and kind of look at why are so many countries all of a sudden in the span of 1 year so interested in joining BRICS or BRICS Plus, as it's referred to upon expansion. Okay, so here are the numbers. In 2001, the dollar share of global reserves was 73%. Okay, so the number of the share of all global reserves was 73% denominated in US dollars. Okay, in 2021, that went from 73% to 55%, and in 2022, it dipped to 47%. Okay, so now it's less than half. You can still say that the US dollar is without a doubt the world's de facto reserve currency. It still is. But you can see that going from 73% a couple of decades ago to now less than half, it's quite a decrease. So the key takeaway for Pepe says is that in the last year, the dollar share slid 10 times faster than the average in the past 2 decades. Now it is no longer far-fetched to project a global dollar share of only 30% by the end of 2024, which coincides with the next presidential election in the US. The defining moment, the actual trigger leading to the fall of the hegemon, as Pepe calls it, was in February 2022, when over $300 billion in Russian foreign reserves were frozen by the collective West, and every other country on the planet began fearing for their own dollar stores abroad. So you guys know what Pepe is referring to. He's talking about when the war in Ukraine began, and what the West did to punish the Russians is, because you have to keep in mind the Russians, they had about 600 billion plus in reserves, and half of that was situated outside of Russia, right? Now you have some people who say, well, how could you? That's so stupid. Why would you trust them with your money and so on and so on? Yeah, but if you need to move money around and participate in that global system, that's how it was. I guess maybe now it's very easy to look back on the Russians and say they were naive, but that's how it is. And the point here is that half of that was frozen by these sanctions. Okay, so they took away half of that, 300 billion, and you've had asset forfeiture and seizure before, but never on a scale like this. Never on a scale like this, and to another country like Russia. Okay, when maybe the rest of the planet, we're all stupid, and what we should have done to punish Britain and North America, and well, yeah, it was a coalition of the willing. Maybe the people who invaded Iraq, we should have just frozen all of their assets and behaved like this. I don't know. You tell me. But I mean, my point here is that this is unprecedented. It's obscene. $300 billion. So he's saying that this scared everybody off. This scared everybody away and put them off of the dollar, because if keeping your money in dollars gets you this kind of treatment whenever you quote unquote misbehave in their eyes, right? Then what's the point of keeping it in dollars? It's risk instead of an asset. So Pepe writes that over 70% of trade deals between Russia and China now use either the ruble or the yuan, according to the Russian finance minister. Russia and India are trading oil in rupees, right? So that's a big point that when it happened, I raised with you guys. And less than 4 weeks ago, Banco Bocom BBM, which is a bank in Latin America, became the first one to sign up as a direct participant of CIPS. So that's basically the Chinese alternative to SWIFT, which I mentioned earlier, the cross-border interbank payment system. So another example of people abandoning the dollar is Total, which is the French energy company, and China's Sinopec, trading their first liquefied natural gas in renminbi instead of euros or dollars, right? The deal between Russia and Bangladesh for the construction of the Raipur nuclear plant will also bypass the dollar. So he cites all of these examples, right? He says now that trade between Russia and Bolivia, can also be settled in Boliviano. And that's very pertinent considering Rosatom's drive to be a crucial part of the development of lithium deposits in Bolivia. You guys remember lithium is key. It's paramount to making batteries, right? And especially with, if you're talking about Bolivia which is not just any country that has lithium deposits. They're the largest on the planet. So yeah, this means something. Okay, this means something. Pepe continues. He says that BRICS, as it stands, is already more relevant to the global economy than the G7. The latest International Monetary Fund figures reveal that the existing 5 BRICS nations will contribute 32% to global growth compared to the G7's 29%. With Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Turkey, Indonesia, and Mexico as possible new members, it is clear that key global South players are starting to focus on the quintessential multilateral institution capable of smashing Western hegemony. He talks here about how MBS, so Mohammed bin Salman, the Saudi crown prince, and now prime minister, if I'm not mistaken, he got a slight promotion last year. He basically steered Saudi Arabia toward Eurasia's new power trio, Russia, Iran, China, and away from the United States. And remember, this is important not because Saudi Arabia has a bunch of oil, but because of that oil being traded in US dollars, which gives the dollar its, basically what is called the petrodollar. The fact that Saudi Arabia sells and denominates oil transactions in dollars exclusively gives the dollar its power. But now you see the Saudis, veering off into a new direction. And I told you this. I told you this was going to happen. And the latest event, which was the peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, brokered by China, which is another BRICS country. I mean, dude, what more do you need? What more do you need? And he even mentions this in literally the next sentence, right? So here he says that the essential point is this: the BRICS have the commodities, and the G7 control finance. The latter can't grow commodities, but the former can create currencies, especially when their value is linked to tangibles like gold, oil, minerals, and other natural resources. Okay? So, the G7, they might control all the banks and the monetary and financial system. Cool. But where are the resources located? Where is the oil? Where's the lithium? Where's all the gold? It's the global South, right? It's Asia. It's Africa. Always has been, right? Pepe continues, arguably the key swing factor is that pricing for oil and gold is already shifting to Russia, China, and West Asia. As a result, demand for dollar-denominated bonds is slowly but surely collapsing. Trillions of US dollars will inevitably start to go back home, shattering the dollar's purchasing power and its exchange rate. The fall of a weaponized currency will end up smashing the whole logic behind the United States global network of 800 military bases and their operating budgets. So, in essence, Pepe is saying that, at one point in the future, no one is going to give a crap about having greenbacks, okay? Having dollars. Especially when it comes to trading commodities like this, right? And what's going to happen is that people are going to ditch the dollars, right? And one way or another, all of these dollars are going to end up back in the United States where they came from. And of course, you will have hyperinflation or some form of inflation, if not hyper. And basically, having too many dollars is going to bring down the value of the dollar, right? So out goes the matrix of 800 military bases with it. Now, he also talks here about the Western policy, which was to try and threaten and isolate Russia through OPEC Plus, but failed, right? And it failed humiliatingly. OPEC Plus, which is effectively run by Moscow and Riyadh, now rules the global oil market, right? And he's talking about how so OPEC is talking about the this is the organization of petroleum and producing countries. So OPEC Plus includes Russia. It does not. So OPEC doesn't, but OPEC Plus does include Russia. And you know, they basically gave the finger to Joe Biden and you know, the West, because Moscow wanted to cut oil production by, I think, 1 million barrels and per day, and the Saudis are the ones who doubled it and said, no, let's do 2, which I think is really adding insult to injury, because you expect that from the Russians, but you don't expect that from the Saudis, who are your you know, strategic partner in the region, right? So that was really a sucker punch. And then Biden, he kind of scurries off after his fist bump, and he doesn't really get any sort of agreement from the Saudis. And you know, this is very good for OPEC Plus, because you know, they can meet those you know, those deadlines, and you know, they can meet that production limit. But if they decide to cut back and not sell everything they have, it raises the prices for them, so they get to sell less while making more money, you know. And on top of it, from the Russians' point of view, they got to stick it to Biden. So Western elites are in a panic, especially after Lula's bombshell on Chinese soil during his visit with Xi Jinping, when he called on the whole global South to replace the US dollar with their own currencies in international trade. And here, scrolling down, Pepe also talks about the petro yuan. Yeah, I mean, if you have a petrodollar, why not a petro yuan, right? So he concludes here that this brings us back to de-dollarization and what will replace the hegemonic reserve currency of the world, right? And that's really in a nutshell why you have all these countries who are not just seeking to join BRICS, but as a natural course, you know, as a natural consequence, they will also seek to join the alternative financial systems and messaging systems, and also to trade in their own currencies, whether they're new currencies, like in the case of Argentina, Brazil, or their own currencies. It doesn't really matter, you know, because we've talked a bit about the Chinese renminbi, or you know, the Russian ruble and so on. But Pepe brings up the, you know, he raises the example of Boliviano being used to settle trade between Bolivia and Russia, right? So this is the beauty of it, right? You have countries just using their own money. And I think Lula, I'm paraphrasing his quote from a few nights ago, but you know, he said something like, you know, every night what keeps him up is the question that keeps him up is why countries choose to use the US dollar instead of their own currencies for, you know, for their international trade. Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something to that would keep one up at night. But really good piece here, because you know, it's a whole sea of change is coming. It's a whole sea of change, and everything you're seeing now is just the beginning. It's really just the beginning. You know, there's a reason why Turkey refused to sanction Russia, because if they did that, they'd be really shooting themselves in the foot. And yeah, they might, you know, they might appease the West and so on, and it might win them some favors there. But tomorrow, in tomorrow's world, which is slowly becoming today, as you know, things accelerate, it's not, and it's not because, you know, countries like Turkey or countries in the global South are afraid of, you know, Russia or China taking revenge on them or something. It's just, it doesn't make sense fiscally, right? It doesn't make sense for them to do this, because all the opportunities and the resources are now in the global South, right? So again, this is as I told you, it's a slow process, but it's a process that's nevertheless been accelerated and turbocharged. And you know, just that the last sentence from the article: the hegemon, clinging to a toxic cocktail of neoliberalism, sanction dementia, and widespread threats, is bleeding from within.
de-dollarization is an inevitable response to system collapse. And in a Sun Tzu 2.0 environment, it is no wonder the Russia-China strategic partnership exhibits no intention of interrupting the enemy while he is so busy defeating himself. For those of you who don't know, Sun Tzu is a Chinese military man and strategist who, forgive me, when was he alive? I think 5th century BC, so quite a while ago, and he wrote to The Art of War, which is, to this day, a must read, and so on. And, you know, Pepe says that this is The Art of War 2.0, right? Essentially. That's a good line. It's a good line here. So I see we've got 600 people watching. Please make sure you guys have hit the like button. And I'm asking you now, before I show you the next thing, which is going to make you cringe. And you're going to hate me for showing you. No, but seriously, make sure you've pressed the thumbs up button because it helps the channel. I see we've got some super chats, so just let me read them to you before I continue. And we'll proceed in a second. Right, so Justin says Ukraine never had nukes. They were Soviet nukes in Ukraine, but Moscow controlled them. Ukraine had no ability to use them. Important correction. Oh, I know that. I knew someone was gonna, you know, be a smart aleck. No offense, and point this out. But the thing is that, you know, if they were really adamant, you can do what's a dirty bomb, right? So, you know, if you guys remember, like early 2000s Sky News, oh my God, there's going to be a dirty bomb from Al Qaeda or Saddam Hussein, which is kind of just like fear mongering crap. I mean, technically speaking, you could still make a dirty bomb out of it. So, you know, it's not, you know, an ICBM, but yeah, it's an important distinction. So, Deanna, I don't see any well, there's no note here, but thank you very much for the super chat, and thank you, Justin, as well. And Kapapa says, any news or thoughts on the situation in Haiti? Yes, so I wasn't planning to do a segment on it, but I'll get to it in a second. And I just kind of wanted to get through to get this out of the way, because it's really as bad as I say it is. Okay, so hold on. Okay. The Israelis are celebrating their 75th year of colonialism in Palestine, and Ursula has a nice little video that she wants you to see.
Dear friends, 75 years ago, a dream was realized with Israel's Independence Day. After the greatest tragedy in human history, the Jewish people could finally build a home in the Promised Land. Today, we celebrate 75 years of vibrant democracy in the heart of the Middle East. 75 years of dynamism, ingenuity, and groundbreaking innovations. You have literally made the desert bloom, as I could see during my visit to the Negev last year. Today we also set.
Oh Jesus, it's so cringy, you know. It's like every word, I just want to rip the headphones out and throw them at the wall. I How many times do we have to do this? How many times? How many times? I mean, do you think if South Africa was still around, like apartheid South Africa, she'd make a video for them? Because this is worse. This is way worse. You know, vibrant democracy, like what, for Jewish settlers? Yeah, maybe for them. Maybe for them it's a vibrant democracy. You know, maybe for Palestinians it isn't. Actually, even Jewish settlers, if you're not a white Jewish settler, you're a Jewish settler from, you know, whatever, Morocco, or, you know, some neighboring country, you would still get treated like shit by the white European Jewish settlers. Not as bad as a Palestinian, but, you know, you definitely get treated worse. Man, you know, what I find so funny about this is that you still have some laws in Israel which are from the British Mandate. So, you know, mandate is a nice way of saying colony. And one of them is the military censor. So, you know, if the military don't like something that you're going to publish because it's classified, or you know, it's damning, or they don't like it, they can just put a muzzle and on the press, the whole press. You are not allowed to publish a word. So, you know, even in the United States and in the United Kingdom, you don't have something like that. They can definitely screw you, you know, they can make your life miserable and, you know, destroy your family and, you know, put you in prison and all these things. But even that is not a thing in the United Kingdom, which made this law in Palestine, right? The military censor. But it's still a thing in Israel, right? They were, you know, flicking through this book of British colonial shit, and, you know, yep, that looks good. Let's keep that one. and the other one is also, of course, the administrative detention, which is basically, it's a military court where the Israelis drag Palestinian civilians. So if you're a Jewish settler, you'll get a regular Israeli court, right? You get a normal court. But if you're a Palestinian, they will take you to a Israeli military court, which is war crime, number one. You can't put civilians in military courts. And then they charge you with something that you are not even allowed to know. Like, think of how archaic that is. Even in the fucking Middle Ages, you know, like when they put you in this thing and pelt fucking fruits at your face, they would tell you, oh, you've done this and that. You know, even in the United States, right? They'll lock you up for 25 years for some, you know, 3 strikes bullshit, but at least they tell you what it is, even if it's completely fake and made up. In Israel, no, let's keep this British colonial law where you can be charged, and it's classified that you and your lawyer are not allowed to know what you've been charged with, and you go to prison. It's not, there's no trial. It's that you go to prison for 6 months, and then every 6 months they can renew it indefinitely. So you know, you got people who've been in prison for 7 years, 10 years. They have no fucking idea why. And this bitch, she fucking stands there and does this you know, cheap green screen video where she sends a greeting card to some, you know, like to some place where even people who lived under apartheid in South Africa are saying this is worse. This is even worse than what we had. Yeah, it is. Jesus, you know, and she talks about making the desert bloom. Yeah, with what? With who? First of all, it's not your desert to make bloom or otherwise. I mean, you know, if I took somebody else's land, you know, and you gave me a bunch of millions and allowed me to do whatever I want there and kick people, you know, off of their settlements and take their desert to make it bloom. Yeah, you know, I think pretty much anyone could do that. That's not really an accomplishment. Make the desert bloom. Make nothing bloom. Go home. Christ, man. You know, I was just telling you guys the other day about Fataha, which is the Palestinian movie. I mean, you didn't know, you didn't need that movie to know this stuff, but the 75 years of independence that she's celebrating right around this exact time when the British were pulling out and leaving a mess there, the Israeli militias were just wiping Palestinian villages off of the map, right? You got hundreds of Palestinian villages that don't exist anymore. They've either completely been destroyed or renamed, and you got 700,000 people who were forced from their land, Palestinians, and it's not just about the number of people. Even if it was half that, does that make it right? Does that make it okay? She I don't know what her next sentence was. I'll play you the rest of the clip, but keep in mind 1/3 of the drinking water that the Israelis have comes from the Golan Heights in Syria. So I just find this so funny because they keep talking about territorial integrity and sovereignty and all these things, which you never heard of before the war in Ukraine happened. They never bring them up when it comes to Syria, right? So it's not just some mountain in the desert or in the Golan. These are pieces of land that are actually worth their weight in gold and times 10. They have gas and oil and water, and they go and build fucking skiing resorts, in the Golan Heights, which is Syrian, right? But in Syria, there's no clean drinking water out of the tap. It's fine as long as the Israelis can come ski. Disgusting. What a disgusting individual.
Celebrate 75 years of friendship between Israel and Europe.
She's German, right? She used to be the defense minister. I wonder why Germany didn't give a giant fucking piece of their own country to make up, because she mentioned the Holocaust. Make up for it then. They've been paying reparations in cash, but she says that they went to Palestine to make a home for themselves. Yeah, because of what? because you were butchering them. And it's not just Germany, it's the UK. The whole idea behind why the Europeans support Israel and Zionism is because it's actually anti-Semitism, like legit anti-Semitism. They hate Jews so much in Europe, and there's centuries to prove that, centuries of history to prove that. They hate them so much that they don't want them in the European continent. So they support moving them everywhere, moving them from everywhere to one place in the Middle East. The whole idea behind it from a European point of view is racist, right? But everyone glosses over that.
We have more in common than geography would suggest. Our shared culture, our values, and hundreds of thousands of dual European Israeli citizens have created a...
Wow. Man. I told you guys last week about this this story from the West Bank where you had 3 British Israelis who were killed in a shooting in the West Bank, and their story, which was published in the BBC, is that basically they had moved from London, and they had expressly gone from London to go live in an illegal settlement in the West Bank, because keep in mind that every Israeli settlement in the West Bank is illegal by definition. There are no legal ones. So and I was trying to point out how extremist, truly I mean that word, extremist, religious extremist, what religious extremists they have to have multiple passports, and they believe in Zionism so much that they go and insist on living there, and moving from a city like London, which again, London has many issues, but it's definitely in a better situation than the West Bank. I think anyone would agree. Why would you leave a capital city in Europe and London, where tons of people would give an arm to live, not because it's better than the West Bank, but in their minds it is. and then go there and endanger yourself and your family just to insist on living, just because you insist on living somebody else's land. This is incredible to me. This is incredible. And once again, it's not because the West Bank is worse than London or something, but the Israeli occupation is what makes the West Bank dangerous, right? If there was no occupation, it would be lovely and perfect and fine. But they insist on occupying it, right? And she says herself, what I've told you guys many times, that many Israelis have dual passports, they have dual citizenship, they can go anywhere in the world as they please. They can live in Europe, they can live on occupied Palestinian land. Many of them, I'm sure, could go and because their parents or grandparents come from a European country and get citizenship in Europe that way. Palestinians don't have this choice. Palestinians have zero. They have no Palestinian statehood at the UN. They, even if they have travel documents, they cannot get visas to leave Palestine. They can't even get tourist visas, never mind residencies. Look at all the advantages they have, and they insist on shitting on Palestinians. Look at all the advantages she has. She was a German defense minister, and she fails upwards in the EU, and she still shits on Palestinians. It's incredible. It's incredible.
Deep connection between us. Europe and Israel are bound to be friends and allies.
Yeah, that's great. You can go be friends somewhere else.
Your freedom is our freedom. Happy birthday to
sure
all the people of Israel.
Yes.
Yom Huledet Sameach.
Here, this is some other atrocity that I saw from the German Air Force, which is incidentally still called the Luftwaffe, right? they changed everything else, but that's still the same. I mean, once the Reichstag, always the Reichstag. I still call it that. But anyway, enough of my jokes. I just want to show you this monstrosity of an atrocity that they published here. This is the official German Air Force Twitter account. So they've basically sent a plane. This is a Eurofighter jet as a present, as a gift to the Israelis. And I'm a bit confused here because I'm not sure which is worse. The act or the design on this thing. It's really quite atrocious. I mean, if that were a gift to me, I'd really do a triple take, and I'd have to ask myself if you're trying to offend me on purpose. What is that? It's really, really bad. It's something else. Anyway, that. How fitting that she was the German defense minister, right? Anyway, enough atrocities for now. Let's move on to the next topic. Here, so I thought I'd show you this clip. This is something that I found. It's actually from a few months ago, but I kept forgetting to show it to you. And so I kind of forgot about it, but let's go through it now. So this is a clip from French TV, and don't worry, there are subtitles for those of you who don't speak French. And this is something I wanted to show you guys a few months ago, and I can't believe I forgot to show. I mean, this is really something else.
Comment les Ukrainiens décoloniseraient en quelque sorte la Crimée.
Ce document, il détaille ce qui sera fait, donc comment réintégrer un territoire peuplé aux 2/3 de Russes. Eh bien, la première étape, c'est de faire partir justement ces Russes. Deuxième étape, donc après cela, réinstaller des Ukrainiens en Crimée. Et enfin, la troisième étape, dérussifier les institutions et les infrastructures.
Man, she's so happy with herself, right? She's like, she's reading a cookbook or some instructions. Step 1, get rid of the Russians. Step 2, add some baking soda. Step 3, de-Russify
Holy crap, man! This is really something else. And you know what's funny to me is that already in the first few couple of seconds, you can see here that they're trying to like basically show you that the number of Russians has gone up between 2001 and 2018, and this is Crimea, right? So even in 2001, look at the figures, 58%. Even in 2001, it's still Russian majority. So, you know, the Ukrainians don't like this, of course, because, well, Russia's now occupying it, all right? Or Russia annexed it, I suppose. You know, the thing is, it's complicated because this was Russia until 1954. And then, you know, at the time, Ukraine and Russia were all, you know, it's all Soviet Union. But it was officially transferred to the Ukrainian, you know, Socialist Republic. Okay, so officially, even though it was all Soviet Union, this still became part of Ukraine in '54. But you can see even until 2014, right? It's still majority Russia, and always has been. That's something that's never changed. So I want you to think about how they are just casually talking on TV about how to de-Russify a piece of land that has always been majority Russian, right? Like, I mean, this has another name. It's called ethnically cleansing. That's what you do, right? When you want to get rid of a people, you want to do what is population transfer, whether you're moving another people that you don't like out and your own people in. Both actions are, you know, they're not just considered war crimes, right? They're crimes against humanity. It's ethnic cleansing. So, you know, this is a very big French channel, very big program, and they're just like casually talking about it. I find this incredible, you know. Anyway, I'll let her continue.
En Crimée. Et enfin, la troisième étape, dérussifier les institutions et les infrastructures.
Si on était Éric Zemmour, on dirait que c'est de la remigration.
Là, c'est très très simple. Du
Même
droit
s'ils sont là
ukrainien
depuis
et du
15 ou
droit
20 ans.
international.
Même voilà, est-ce que c'est si simple que ça de modifier la composition démographique d'une péninsule comme la Crimée? Je parle du réel. La difficulté, c'est la démographie.
Je vous rappelle que après la Seconde Guerre mondiale, vous avez eu des transferts de population massifs. Alors c'est douloureux.
Wow.
Oui, mais avouez que les époques ont changé.
Ah oui, non, mais les époques n'ont pas changé. Non, contrairement à
déplacer des populations aujourd'hui, ça prend une toute autre signification.
Eh ben, c'est ce qui risque de se passer, et ça risque d'être douloureux, parce que là, c'est 10% de la population de la Crimée qui risque d'être déportée vers la Russie.
Je ne dirais pas déportée, là, en l'occurrence.
Oui, mais si, parce qu'on va leur dire de partir. Vous n'avez pas le choix. Les Russes sont aujourd'hui en train de déporter une partie des Ukrainiens.
Oui, mais la Russie n'est pas un État démocratique. Voilà.
Donc, les échanges de population, ils peuvent parfaitement être prévus par les traités. Par exemple,
I like how his problem is that, you know, well, Russia's not a democracy, so, you know, transferring populations, you can't trust them because they're not democratic. That this is ethnic cleansing. It's very clearly outlined in the Geneva Convention, in the UN Charter, in whatever fucking document you want. No. Oh, this is fucking funny, man.
Par exemple, le traité de Sèvres de 1923 a échangé la population grecque de Turquie avec la population turque de Grèce, et on a échangé les populations. Est-ce que
Yeah, that was a treaty though, right? Like, he leaves out the part that it was negotiated by two states and not forced, you know, population transfer. By the way, let me reassure you, I speak French fluently, and there, everything you are seeing in the subtitles is accurately translated. It's not lost in translation. In my case, they're saying exactly what they are saying. There is nothing misunderstood here whatsoever. As a matter of fact, it sounds even worse in French. The candor in which they say it is it makes it 10 times worse. I wish you could hear it the same way I do. I wish. It's amazing. I've never seen anyone talk about ethnic cleansing on TV with such you know, candor. It's amazing, really. And I find it funny how you know, they suddenly. You saw that woman, she was saying, even if it takes 10 years or 20 years, we have to get it done because, you know, according to her, I think she must think it's the right thing, right? So this is incredible to me because I have never, ever in my life seen someone talk about what you know, how to fix the problem in Palestine with such ease. Because the thing is that in Palestine, guess where the majority of people are from?
They're Palestinian, yes? And so you have a tiny minority of Jewish settlers from Europe and elsewhere in the world who are governing over a Palestinian majority and treating them like fifth-class non-citizens, right? They're non-citizens, literally non-citizens. So, you know, if you said to them, well, the Jewish settlers who colonized Palestine, because you saw Ursula von der Leyen bitch giving them that stupid greeting card video. Oh, happy 75 years of independence. If she was being honest, she would say it's colonial, right? If she was being honest, she would say, you guys, I mean, she said in the video, a ton of you guys are European and you have dual citizenship because guess what? You're European. Oh, our cultural ties are inseparable. Yeah, because you're fucking European. You will never see someone on mainstream press in France or anywhere else say the same thing that you have just seen them say about de-Russifying Crimea, which, you know, literally for centuries has been nothing but Russian. It's been nothing but Russian. Inside and outside Ukraine, it's been nothing but Russian. Even on their own program, they're showing you most people who live here are fucking Russian. It's Ukraine, you know, for a couple decades, but they're still Russians. But they still want to de-Russify it and remove the ethnic Russians who live there. But if you tell them, well, why don't you move the Jewish settlers who are, you know, occupying Palestine, who have a system of apartheid, and worse, because people who lived in Africa, in apartheid South Africa, even say it's worse, who have this racist form of government against Palestinians, this totalitarian, this dictatorship, which is literally military rule and occupation in every sense of the word. If you say, well, they should go back to where they fucking came from because they are the ones who are trying to erase Palestinians, literally, physically, culturally, politically, economically, socially, in every fucking lee and goddamn adverb in the English and every language. Oh my God, you are so anti-Semitic. Really? Because actually Palestinians are Semites. These guys are just Europeans, right? So even the Semitic ethnicity, they try to take it away from the Palestinians, even though every dictionary in the world will tell you a Semite is a Semitic person who speaks a Semitic language. Check for every Palestinian, every Arab, and of course, the Jews who come from that area, right? No. No rights for Palestinians, no citizenship for Palestinians, no representation for Palestinians, no fucking ethnicity for Palestinians, 000. But we can talk about, you know, ethnic cleansing of Russians on TV. That's okay, right? Wow. Some fucking double standards if I've ever seen any. Jesus Christ. Don't these people feel disgusting? Holy shit. You couldn't even say one fucking 10 seconds of this shit would not be, you would be crucified on television if you said this shit about any, you know, French colonial, the crap they did in Algeria. If you said this at the time, right? Or if you said this right now about the Israelis and what they're doing to the Palestinians, this idea that you should return home, unacceptable. But, you know, let's ethnically cleanse Crimea, which has always been Russian. Wow. Need I go on? The clip is 7 seconds, but you know, I try. It's more than you would be able to bear. I watched the whole thing. It's no different.
Et une horreur. Ukrainiens peuvent pas dire, on va faire ça avec des fleurs et en chantant. Ça ne se passera pas comme ça sera brutal.
Ah, t'as raison. Les Palestiniens non plus. Retiens ça. Palestinians don't owe you any friendship or kindness either. Remember that. Here, perfect timing. Since we're speaking about the Israelis, I wanted to discuss Pegasus and Israeli spyware. So, you know, there have been some developments about that from Citizen Lab, and I'll go through them one by one with you. So I'm sure you guys remember Pegasus is this Israeli
piece of spyware that was developed by a company called NSO Group, and it was infamously used to, basically the Israelis, they go around to foreign, they go around selling this to foreign governments, and the Saudis infamously used this to kill Jamal Khashoggi. They tracked his location, they tracked his phone, and then they killed him. There are other companies that are springing up that are just like NSO Group. As a matter of fact, they are literally founded by former employees of NSO Group that you're not hearing a lot about in the press. So I wanted to kind of go through them, because this company, which is called Quadream, Quadream, they have tried so hard to remain under the radar. They do not even have a logo or a website. Nothing, right? But once again, as I said, it is one of many companies that has emerged from this pipeline. You have basically a pipeline between this private sector, Israeli private sector, and cyber weapon companies coming from the Israeli military. Although, to be fair, every man and woman who is Israeli is in the military, but specifically from Unit 8200, right? So who specialize in this kind of stuff. They get their pension when they're 40, $3,000 a month or whatever it is now, adjusted for inflation, and then they also embark on these endeavors. And why this is so important is because these companies, they just to function, to sell to anyone outside of Israel, they need permission from the Israeli defense ministry. Okay, so the Israeli government knows about them and knows what they are selling. Okay, this is very clear. Number two, if you think that this is really a private sector, I mean, you would be mistaken to think about that. Think of them as such in the United States. Never mind in Israel, because the relationship is much tighter. As I just mentioned, this pipeline, it's a very close knit, very very small amount of people who acquire this knowledge and who know how to use it, and then basically know how to monetize these cyber weapons. They're used to spy on journalists and spy on lawyers, and overwhelmingly all the cases that you hear of, it's never terrorists or counterterrorism. It's civil society that's being targeted by the Mexican government, the Saudi government, you name it, right? So the problem is that Jamal Khashoggi's murder by the Saudi government drew a lot of bad press, okay? Both for the Saudis and for NSO Group. They got put on this list of basically the Biden government. They had to make a list of these companies and sanction them and so on. And so, by their own, in their own words, right? I'll read this to you in a minute. The bad press from everything that ensued, it's caused the industry to shrink, and so some of these companies are having to close down. What a shame. Now, I'll show you in a second why that's also not true. So let me go through this piece here. This is from Citizen Lab. Now, Citizen Lab is from the University of Toronto. They are the ones who find out what spyware is being used. They're really at the cutting edge of all this stuff. They are the guys who are discovering the methods, the exploits, the zero-day exploits, and all the other tools that are being used by these companies and the way that they are being used in. So here they talk about Quadreams, okay? Now, here's the company, right? As I spelled it out for you, it's basically, as I said, an Israeli company, and it was run by a front called InReach. Now, the thing is, the reason that they were able to gather a lot of this information is because of basically a legal battle that's ensued between InReach and Quadream. Just to put it in a nutshell, InReach is a company based in Cyprus, and they were supposed to sell the hacks for Quadream, and then they would give 92% of the proceeds to Quadream. Quadream discovered that they were being screwed, that they were not giving them the money and pretending that they were not getting your clients.
and they're basically trying to sue them in court, and there are millions of dollars involved and so on. Now, at the same time, you have Facebook, which is now known as Meta, who've discovered accounts being used on Facebook and Instagram that are linked to Quadream, which, as Facebook says, is an Israeli-based company founded by former NSO employees, right? And then Microsoft also, they talk about an exploit called Kingspawn, which is used by Quadream. So you have Facebook, Microsoft, and Citizen Lab, all talking about in their research this company, Quadream, using these hacks and these accounts and these exploits to try and infect the devices of civil society. So that's lawyers, judges, journalists, etc. Right? Now, the really interesting thing here is that if you actually go and look at what Quadream was saying, is that they were being affected by the bad press and so on from Pegasus and all this. And what you really find is that these guys are shutting down or pretending to shut down their company, and then they go and make a new company, and it's really just the same guys, right? So right now they told the people who work at Quadream or used to, right? They had an office here on the left, with no logo, no nothing, and you can see here from Haaretz, which is an Israeli paper, that this was based in Ramat Gan, which is near to Tel Aviv. Now, I've read from several papers, including Reuters and so on, they all went to this address and tried to contact this company. They tried to email their lawyer. They tried email, tons of methods to contact them. Not a peep, nothing, not a word. Okay? Now, Haaretz have a pretty good piece on this. They, I must say, it was a very good piece. Unfortunately, it's not loading for some reason. But, everything that I've told you, that's what's happening in a nutshell. Now, Citizen Lab, they're the ones who are doing the research, right? And if you want another indicator as to why these are the same people, the exploits that they're using. So if you look at the actual code that's being executed by these weapons, by these cyber weapons, they are almost identical in terms of functionality and also their capability. So last year, there was one hack against iPhones that NSO Group was able to do with Pegasus, and mysteriously, Quadream were also able to do that exact same one. So this doesn't make sense because these are rivals. These companies, NSO Group and Quadream, are rivals. How is it that at the exact same time they are able to do the exact same thing? Now, yes, we're not talking about two laptop manufacturers or something that is some loosely regulated thing. We are talking about a very, very tightly regulated industry that sells cyber weapons, right? That is surveillance for hire. So how come they acquired the same capabilities at the same time? I mean, I just told you, these are former employees. So yes, they could have transferred the technology that way. But I can just mark my words. Quadream shut down in the last 3 days, okay? The reason they shut down was not because the industry is taking a hit from Biden's sanctions list and so on. It's because they got bad press. They got too much bad press. And this is the same old stereotype about this furniture store that is always going broke, right? And everything's got to go because the store is going broke. And then, you see it's the same people who work in the same store selling the same crap who pop up under a different name. Mark my words, Quadream or whatever it's called today, right, is going to pop up very, very soon. And you're going to see them under a different name. And they won't be found out yet. They won't be found out for a while because, like I said, they don't want any trace of this. And the only reason that it was able to identify them is because of that legal battle. I think were it not for that, there would have been a good chance that people just dismissed it as being, it's another toolkit from put out by NSO Group or it's just Pegasus. Now, let me go into a little bit more detail on these exploits, okay? Because last week, Citizen Labs, who are doing this research, they put out here. Just give me a second so it actually loads. Yeah. So last week, Citizen Lab, who are doing all of this research on the Israeli spyware and all these tools, they put out a paper saying that NSO Group, which manufactures Pegasus, had basically been able to exploit iOS 15 and iOS 16 in a multitude of ways. Okay, so again, Pegasus doesn't only target iPhones, but it's primarily geared towards iPhones. And, you know, this tells us already a number of things right off the bat, that Pegasus is still in development, despite all the bad press, and NSO Group is still around, despite the bad press, and the stricter export rules, if they're even real. And number two, that they are able to infect both iOS 15 and iOS 16 devices, okay? And now here, this is very important because do you guys remember, I mean, there have been many disappeared people in Mexico, but do you remember a few years ago, there was an entire class, like 43 people who went missing in Mexico? I remember that specific story in mind. And basically, in a lot of these cases, civil society, they accuse the military, the Mexican military, of being involved in some way. And the day that this NGO in Mexico announced they were going to be investigating this and who they were going to be investigating, the lawyers working there had their iPhones infected on these exact dates of their presentations. Is that a coincidence? No, it's definitely not a coincidence. And the thing here that's very important about this is that Pegasus is now able to exploit multiple facets of iOS. So, you know, basically they go into detail in this paper how it was able to exploit a problem in iMessage and then use that to continue another exploit somewhere else in I think it was the Home app in iOS. Okay, so you know, here they give you background information about the people who have actually been targeted. It's these and they've agreed to make their names known. So again, this is the NGO PRODH, and these two, so Espinosa and Rodriguez, they're both representing victims of military abuses in Mexico. Okay, so these are the people who are infected with Pegasus, and we know that Mexico is a customer of NSO Group. Okay, so the Mexican government, from what it appears, you know, has bought this spyware from Israel and used it against people that are investigating the Mexican military. Now, one way that this happened, one of the targets, so Mr. Aguilera, who's the director, you know, he was infected after Pegasus tried getting it through, getting at its device through text message. This is in 2017. 2016, and they discovered it in 2017. And then in 2022, they're still coming at him. He was infected at least twice via Find My Pawn exploit. Now, these names that are in black, that are in bold and italics on the screen, these are names, they're not the actual names of the exploit. It's just names that the researchers at Citizen Lab have given them because they don't know the real ones. But it's really incredible, right? Basically, this is what happens. They would use the Find My iPhone app, okay? It's suspected, as they say. Then couple that with iMessage. Apologies, a few minutes ago I said it was the other way around, but it's first with Find My iPhone, then with iMessage, and then with the Home app and iMessage. Now, why am I telling you all this? I'm telling you all this because the thing is, Apple, they released something called lockdown mode about a year ago. So if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly, it came out with iOS 16, and they released this thing called lockdown mode specifically for people like that who are targeted by Pegasus, who are targeted by this kind of state level spyware. Okay, and you have a lot of articles in the press that have come out in the last couple of days as a result of this paper, claiming that, oh my God, lockdown mode in iOS seems to be really working. That is absolutely not. That is not true. No one knows if it actually works. The only thing that happened is that one of these people got a notification as they were being hacked, which, you know, I guess is common courtesy. No, but that's all we know. The researchers made a simple mock-up that lockdown mode was telling the person that they're being infiltrated through the home app. That's it. And they see underneath that they say that we have seen no recent notifications on lockdown mode, okay? Nor have we seen any evidence of successful upon your home compromise on lockdown mode. Now, given that we have seen no indications that NSO has stopped deploying upon your home, this suggests that NSO may have figured out a way to correct the notification issues, such as by fingerprinting lockdown mode. Additionally, we have not seen any cases of exploitation on iOS version 16.1 and greater, suggesting that this exploit may have been fixed or mitigated around this time. So just let me translate this for you. They're basically saying that they haven't seen any evidence of it. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Okay? It's possible that the people who work at NSO Group they realize and they know that the target of this hack will get a notification, and they found a way to fix that. They found a way to hide their traces better. And one thing that is very clear throughout this paper, published by Citizen Lab, is that NSO Group are getting better and better at hiding their traces. They're not always successful, which is how they're able to identify the hacks in the first place. But they are getting, this is something that you can see from the code. They are trying to do this on purpose to obfuscate that they have hacked these target devices and to get rid of the traces. They're not always successful, but they are trying to do that. And the point here is that you shouldn't blindly trust, lockdown mode to protect your device. So, naturally, mainstream press. I mean, it was just a few tech papers. I think it was PC Magazine and TechCrunch who were reporting on this, and they were saying, they were hailing it as some holy grail. It's not, and the researchers are saying themselves, maybe the Israelis just figured a way to hide it better. We don't know. So I really wanted to talk about this because, for both those reasons, because on the one hand, you have people who think NSO Group is the only one that does this, but really the employees there are maybe purposely or not leaving the company and starting other companies just like it. So it becomes a game of whack-a-mole, And then most people have no clue about this, right? I think the only reason most people know about Pegasus is because of Khashoggi. But if that hadn't happened, and it's bound to happen when these things are used to target journalists and civil society, but if it hadn't happened, I don't think most people would know what Pegasus is or what NSO Group is, and they definitely don't know what Quadream is or the other companies that are also Israeli and also selling this spyware to anyone who wants, And I can guarantee you one thing. I talked about this before, but I can guarantee you the countries who buy this from the Israelis are themselves being spied on through whether it's Pegasus or whatever else it is. They have no clue how to run these things. Never mind break down the code and the Israelis. It's complete. You could think of it this way, that it's a two-faceted venture here. On the one hand, you're making money. This is a very, very lucrative industry. These things don't sell for $2 a pop. These are hundreds of millions for all we know. I mean, just from Quadream alone, they were battling with their front group for millions. Okay, what do you think NSO Group is making? So on the one hand, they're making money, and on the other hand, it could be an opportunity for the Israelis to spy on their own customers, right? Why not? Their business is literally spying, and that's why they sell these tools to spy on people. So would you put it past them or past anyone who is selling this software, whether it's the Israelis or the Americans or whoever? I wouldn't. All right, guys, quick break. We'll be right back. I need to get something to drink.
Sweden wanted to join NATO. They broke with their decades-long neutral stance. Turkey was one of the only countries, I think, along with Hungary, that was saying, we're not going to let you in, because you need to have consensus, right? You need all the members in NATO to say, okay, you can join. Their bid has kind of been in limbo because Turkey wanted to, extract several concessions. It was very clear that they really want to join NATO in Sweden, and they were doing everything they could to appease the Turks. And then this moron comes in front of the Turkish embassy and burns the Quran. I understand that in their point of view, this is freedom of expression, and you're in Sweden, you can do whatever you like. But you have to remember that if you're trying to get Turkey support, maybe wait until after you've gotten it. I mean, this is just dumb from a diplomatic level. They're doing everything to appease Turkey, and then because of one idiot, they let this go to waste. The Germans and the Americans have decided that it would be a good idea to send Ukraine tanks. German tanks against the Russian. Man, I'm perplexed by this. What do they think is going to happen? Because even if you can train the Ukrainian crews who are used to Soviet tanks to operate British tanks, and then you got to train them to operate German tanks, and then you got to train them to operate American tanks, and that's if they can even maintain the logistical supply line to work with these tanks, to keep them running. What kind of door are you opening now for the Russians to do? I mean, this is very clearly escalation. While Germany and the US are saying, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine tanks, the doomsday clock has been moved to 90 seconds to midnight. So this is basically, it's a measurement of how close we are to the end of the world, to the apocalypse, to annihilating the planet with nuclear weapons, right? And this is the closest it's ever been to midnight, okay? Midnight representing the end. Ukraine's most senior military commander has said that his forces need about 300 Western tanks. Over the last year, NATO allies in Eastern Europe supplied Ukraine with Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks that have been ground down or destroyed in constant fighting. Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks. Now, Ukraine, having been a Soviet satellite state and part of the Soviet Union, it was part of Russia, all of its military personnel being trained on Russian tanks. What do you think they're going to do with American tanks or German tanks, which they are not trained to operate? The Ukrainians know how to operate Russian tanks. That's all they know how to operate. The Ukrainians only use Soviet stuff, right? Until the last couple of years and until now. This is the first major influx of NATO weapons. And again, NATO has been training Ukrainian forces, but Challenger tanks, this is brand new. If they can't even use the tanks that they are trained to use, what makes you so confident they're going to know how to use a Leopard 2 or an M1A2 or a Challenger 2? Man, people train on those things for fucking months and years. Both of these Home Secretaries, okay? Suella Braverman.
All right, guys, we're back. Get ready for your next round of cringe. Get ready. I've got some cringe prepared for you. Okay, so Joe Biden has formally announced that he's running for president. I mean, you may think that, or for re-election, you may have thought that this was obvious, but yes, he still announced it nevertheless. And I thought we could, take a look at his campaign video. Yeah. Oh boy. What is with the horror music? I mean, it's it's gonna be bad. You already know. Just those single notes.
Freedom. Personal freedom is fundamental to who we are as Americans.
There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred.
Every time I think of personal freedom, I just picture Kamala Harris, laughing at my face like a donkey.
That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy,
This shouldn't be a red or blue issue.
to protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair share.
Okay, I mean, to be fair, whenever I think of Joe Biden and his first term, I'm always going to think of war in Ukraine. The biggest diplomatic fuck up of this century. Perhaps. I don't know. There are many of them.
Shot at making it. But around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting social.
Yo, man, it's not 2020. Why'd you keep talking about Orange Cheeto Man? No one cares. What does that have to do with Trump? You can't do that. You're on your own now. Okay? Trump is gone. You are on your own. You won.
Social Security that you paid for your entire life.
Hold on a second. What?
Bedrock freedoms. Cutting Social Security.
You cut Social Security. That's all you've done. Your whole life. It's a career move, man.
That you paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy, dictating what healthcare just.
Dude, you're the very wealthy. You come from Delaware. Delaware is like the tax haven of the United States, right? That's Biden, man. Oh, come on.
Decisions women can make, banning books and telling people who they can love. All while
are they banning books and telling people who they can love? What do these things have to do with each other, man?
Making it more difficult for you to be able to vote.
Oh, here they come. They try to make it look like cool slow motion when they're walking side by side, but it actually just looks really cringy. He looks really bad. He's not even moving. Look at his face. Look at his face. She's the only one who's like actually speaking, and he's look at his face. Oh my god, it's so bad. They had to put in an extra shot there of slow motion just so you really get it. Like Joe Biden is walking. He is. We promise.
When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America.
Yes, you did.
And we still are.
I remember.
The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too.
Nuclear holocaust, World War III.
This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election. Because I know America. I know we're good and decent people. I know we're still a country that believes in honesty and respect and treating each other with dignity. That we're a nation where we give hate no safe harbor. We believe that everyone is equal, that everyone should be given a fair shot to succeed in this country.
Thank you for choosing us.
Every generation of Americans has faced a moment when they have to defend democracy. Stand up for our personal freedom. Stand up for the right to vote and our civil rights.
I'm going to spare you the last minute. I mean, everything he's saying sounds very nice, but, he hasn't mentioned Zelensky once. So this is probably Russian disinformation. Okay? He's probably a Putin stan. Oh god. Here, let me play this clip for you here. Yeah, do you guys remember this guy with the rolled up sleeves who jumps to the screen talking about what opinion polls say, like it's the most exciting sport on earth?
We ask all Americans here, should Joe Biden run for re-election? 26% say yes, 70% say no. Should Donald Trump run for his old job? 35% say yes, 60% say no. Big majorities say that.
Yeah, I can. What does that tell you? What does that tell you? Like, I find this very, very disconcerting. You have so many nice people in America who are qualified, who are smart, who are fit to actually do this job, and then you get these two trash cans. Look at them.
Most people don't even want you to run. Most people want none of you. This is the most accurate thing you will ever see on television. It's the only poll figure you should believe and you should trust. It's that one. No Biden and no Trump. No, thank you. No, none of you. Thank you very much. I think you can guess what the rest of the clip is going to be, and I think you can guess. Unfortunately, we had to bring this guy along. Yeah, I have to be objective and let both of them speak. Well, actually, try to speak while I cut and interrupt because they shouldn't be heard speaking. But anyway, this is basically Trump's response to Biden's election video. I mean, okay.
You could take the 5 worst presidents in American history.
Sorry, he's so funny, man. Look at him. How does he have like 5 colors of face? Look at him, man. He's like, they're not different shades. It's like 5 different, completely different colors. I know I call him Orange Cheetah Man, but this is getting out of hand. This is really getting out of hand. Can you guys hear him properly? Hold on, let me turn this up. I apologize in advance.
You could take the 5 worst presidents in American history and put them together, and they would not have done the damage Joe Biden has done to our nation in just a few short years. Not even close. Thanks to Joe Biden's socialist spending calamity.
Oh my God, this is the thing with the Republicans. You know, anything that's like to the left socialist, it's communist. Joe Biden is more capitalist than you, and you're fucking Donald Trump. You have towers named after you. That's how capitalist Biden is. He's literally more capitalist than you. Truly. I don't mean that as a compliment. Quite the opposite.
American families are being decimated by the worst inflation in half a century. Banks are failing, our currency is crashing, and the dollar will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat in over 200 years.
He's not wrong on the last one. The dollar will no longer be the world's reserve currency at some point in the future. I mean, okay, anyone could have predicted that, but he's not wrong on that one. He's not wrong on that one. And that's, I was literally just saying that the same thing to you 30 minutes ago or 1 hour ago whenever we were discussing BRICS, right? More and more countries are, you know, they're swerving and veering away from the dollar. Now, once again, that was going to happen at some point in the future, you know, whether an asteroid hit the Earth or whatever, you know, yes, obviously. But how fast? How fast till we get to that point? Has Joe Biden made that faster? Yeah. Has he accelerated that process? Yes, absolutely. And this is because of the war in Ukraine. This is because of the sanctions, the $300 billion in Russian assets they froze. Who wants to have dollars when you do that to people who use your currency? You weaponize it against you. Punish them for using your money and making your money, you know, rise in value. What the hell? But I mean, has Donald Trump done similar things? Of course. That he came up with the Caesar Act sanctions on Syria. He you know, pulled out of Iran nuclear deal and put sanctions on Iran. Yeah, definitely. He put sanctions on everyone. So he's also to blame. Definitely. But the war in Ukraine, that's really the big catalyst. And I know he goes on, he likes to say a lot, oh, if I were president, it wouldn't have happened. I actually don't know if that's true. I don't think, I mean, you can't know. But maybe. I mean, he had John Bolton in his administration who says neocon as they come. So maybe, I mean, you killed Soleimani and almost started a war there, you know. I really don't know. I don't actually know. You know, which is kind of bad enough, which really says it all. You're not that different, you know. And that's the problem. But anyway, I'll let him speak more than 30 seconds. So.
Real wages have been falling 24 months in a row. In other words, under Biden, workers have gotten a pay cut each and every month for 2 straight years. We have surrendered our energy independence, just like we surrendered in Afghanistan, which we had just a short time ago, and the price of gasoline just hit a 5-month high, and it's going much higher than that. Under my leadership, we had the most secure border.
No, hold on. He mentioned Afghanistan. Yo, didn't Trump send Pompeo to negotiate with the Taliban? I mean, you could say that you know, that would have led to a more acceptable avenue of exit. Yeah, but what's really funny is that a lot of these people who are you know saying, oh, Biden his exit from Afghanistan was humiliating and this would have never happened under Trump. I mean, well, they kind of kicked your ass, and the fact you were negotiating with them is because they did just that. Now, obviously, the two are not comparable, you know, but I will remind you of this. They negotiated with the Trump administration to have a withdrawal, and nobody respected the deadline. None of them respected the deadline. They kept trying to push it back, and then, you know, when Biden got in, he didn't even acknowledge them. You know, he just kind of stayed there, and you remember it was supposed to be May, and then the withdrawal was in August of that year. So, you know, it's just funny to me because they blame Biden for you know for not staying longer in Afghanistan. Well, what's your alternative? You want to keep occupying them? That's unacceptable. You can't occupy that country. It's not your country. You know, it's like trying to, you know, between these two, man, it's really an effort to try and differentiate between them. Their behavior is so nasty, you know, especially when it comes to other countries, especially. And again, I know some people like say, well, you know, Trump, at least he took some steps with North Korea. No. Yeah, okay. What else? There was a photo op. Did he pay any money back? You know, you ran out of things to bomb in Korea. Truly, literally. That's, go see how many pilots have said that. Ran out of things to bomb. Have you paid any of that money back? Do you have an embassy? You know, any moves towards real sides? I don't know. I think people give this guy too much credit. Trump. You know, they say he's less war or more anti-war than Biden. Really? I mean, Biden's been in office longer, and he did Iraq. He helped do that, and he was trying to do it even before in '98 and so on. Yeah, definitely. So you could say over the long term he's done more damage. And then Ukraine now. So, you know, we're not done writing his resume. But Trump, you know, he did a lot of intense, nasty sanctions on people. So that I think I'll just end on what most Americans say in this poll, which is that Joe Biden should not run and Donald Trump should not run. You know, I find it incredible. You have this country with 320 million people, and these are the only two they can come up with. I mean, obviously, you know, the system is rigged, so it's a tiny amount of people, a tiny group of people who come up with these two. But it's really, really shame. And you know, Biden, I'm offended he did not add Zelensky to his video. That was very bad taste. He should check himself, okay? For he might find that he's a bit too pro-Russia for my liking. Oh God, these two, man. I know some people think that it might be a rematch between them. I don't know why. I get the feeling that's not gonna, you know, pan out. I think, again, I'm purely speculating here. I'm pretty sure Biden's gonna be the nominee for the DNC. I mean, if he weren't, wow. But when it comes to the Republicans, right? I mean, I think you've had quite a fair amount of people in the Republican Party kind of try and, you know, without insulting Trump, they basically just say, well, it's time to look forward, and in other words, forget about him. you have, of course, you have he still has support, but even the first time when he ran, I was watching all those debates then. I mean, he clobbered them. Ted Cruz and a lot of the people who kiss his ass now. He clobbered them the first time round, which is incredible. I mean, you gotta remember that he came in as an outsider, and I don't think anyone expected him to win the Republican nomination. Never mind the presidency. But my point is that will he get it this time round? Anything is possible. Anything is possible. But I'll tell you one thing. Mike Pompeo is not running. Yes, I know you're heartbroken as I am. Mike Pompeo will not be running. He's explicitly ruled it out. So, you never know. Can make a good vice president with Orange Cheeto Man. Yeah, that's quite a bill. Yeah, we'll see what they do. Oh God. I'm sorry, I left you on Trump, and it was I know for some of you it's traumatizing to stare at his You guys have been very kind, and I'm glad we could cover so many topics. I wanted to do some more, cover some more topics, but I'm gonna leave them for next time. Again, thank you to everybody who's supporting the show. Usually I would sit and read all of your comments, but I gotta run. Nevertheless, I wanted to go live with you because, obviously I'm not talking about their goddamn presidential nomination, but I would say the Zelensky China story, or Xi Jinping and Zelensky, that's, one of the biggest things this week. Once again, the Chinese, they surprised me. I was not expecting this. They've said before, oh yeah, we want peace between Russia and Ukraine, which is, I think everybody says that. But they're putting in the work, and I'm also happy to see Zelensky is warming to them. I was not expecting that either, because I was in the West, most people accuse the Chinese of just blindly supporting Russia. It's not true. That's definitely not true. And yeah, I know this is difficult to understand, but their foreign policy is quite different, and that can be good and bad. If you look at their foreign policy with already with Ukraine, Russia, some people, it makes them very angry because they say, well, China should support the Ukrainians. It's the logical thing to do. How can they maintain ties with the Russians and so on? And you'll have some people who have the same opinion about the Chinese and the Israelis. The Chinese are big investors in Israel, right? And this is unconscionable for many people. Now, I will say this: for an Arab country to have ties with Israel is a much bigger issue for every reason than the Chinese. Okay, it's a much bigger issue because the whole point is that you have this reality because there was no unified Arab bloc, and there still is no unified Arab bloc. So it's not comparable, but like, for example, Morocco, Morocco having ties with Israel, and while there is no Palestinian state, while Palestinians still have a state, is much bigger issue, right? But you still have people who look at this and say, this is apartheid. How can you invest in that? How can you own? I think it's in Haifa, right? In the port there, the Chinese own quite a bit of that port. And absolutely, absolutely, I agree. But the thing is, the Palestinian issue is a much bigger issue than what is happening now. And I say this in terms of the timeline. This has been going on for 70 years. Ukraine war is 1 year. The Palestinians, what they've been subjected to is it's incomparable. The problem is, though, when we talk about Ukraine, Russia, that is, everybody is included in that, because it has ripple effects, it has consequences on the entire planet. Nuclear war, rising prices, the grain, whatever, you name it, and it's affecting everybody. So it's very difficult, but I don't think you can compare that to the Chinese having ties with Russia, and like some Arab country having ties with Israel. It's completely different. It's not even the same ballpark. It's nothing. So my point here is that the Chinese, when they talk about neutrality, they really mean it, because they've shown that in other cases. Okay, and I was actually telling you about this just last week with this specific example. So now when they're, obviously they want to see Belt and Road Initiative and BRICS Plus and Shanghai Cooperation Organization grow and all this to transpire. Absolutely, because they're invested in that since day one. They have helped pioneer that vision, right? Definitely. But I think from their point of view, definitely they want to see that grow, but that doesn't mean that they exclusively want Russia to triumph, because actually the best thing for them is that there's a diplomatic settlement. You know why? Because they want preferably for Russia and Ukraine to be included in that. And they want other countries to see China as a peacemaker. I know this is very obvious. Perhaps I should have made that clearer in the video, but this is good for the Chinese reputation. Definitely, it's very, very good for their reputation to be seen as the peacemakers. Not just once, but maybe even twice, so not just Iran, Saudi, maybe Russia, Ukraine. If they can fix that as well, wow. I already give them, a lot of respect and props for the first one, but if they can pull this one off, wow. Because look at the difference. It's not, let's throw weapons at one side. If they really wanted to support the Russians, they'd be giving them weapons, right? Plain and simple, right? Plain and simple. But they're not. And they're not giving the Russians support in any other way. It's just, it's just, we'll have ties with both of you. But in any case, this is definitely good for them, and it raises their image on the world stage and their prestige without question. This is definitely good for their image. But you shouldn't think that that's their primary motive, because it's not. I'm just saying that it's an obvious consequence on top of peace, in addition to peace. Whether they can achieve it or not, it does make them look good, without question. They actually mean it. I think you can definitely say their intentions are genuine, and it's not for show, because Iran, Saudi Arabia, how long do you think it took them to get that? That you have to be invested, right? You have to mean it. In any case, thank you all for tuning in, and thank you for supporting the channel. Apologies if I didn't get time to read all of your questions and comments and so on. We'll have time not next week, but next live stream. So thank you to everyone who's supporting the show on Patreon and YouTube and whatever. And all the links are below. And Claudia's kind. She's very she's very thorough and has put all the links and things below. So thank you guys very much. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Ma salami.
Sweden wanted to join NATO. They broke with their decades-long neutral stance. Turkey was one of the only countries, I think, along with Hungary, that was saying, we're not going to let you in, because you need to have consensus, right? You need all the members in NATO to say, okay, you can join. Their bid has kind of been in limbo because Turkey wanted to, extract several concessions. It was very clear that they really want to join NATO in Sweden, and they were doing everything they could to appease the Turks. And then this moron comes in front of the Turkish embassy and burns the Quran. I understand that in their point of view, this is freedom of expression, and you're in Sweden, you can do whatever you like. But you have to remember that if you're trying to get Turkey support, maybe wait until after you've gotten it. I mean, this is just dumb from a diplomatic level. They're doing everything to appease Turkey, and then because of one idiot, they let this go to waste. The Germans and the Americans have decided that it would be a good idea to send Ukraine tanks. German tanks against the Russian. Man, I'm perplexed by this. What do they think is going to happen? Because even if you can train the Ukrainian crews who are used to Soviet tanks to operate British tanks, and then you got to train them to operate German tanks, and then you got to train them to operate American tanks, and that's if they can even maintain the logistical supply line to work with these tanks, to keep them running. What kind of door are you opening now for the Russians to do? I mean, this is very clearly escalation. While Germany and the US are saying, yeah, we're going to give Ukraine tanks, the doomsday clock has been moved to 90 seconds to midnight. So this is basically, it's a measurement of how close we are to the end of the world, to the apocalypse, to annihilating the planet with nuclear weapons, right? And this is the closest it's ever been to midnight, okay? Midnight representing the end. Ukraine's most senior military commander has said that his forces need about 300 Western tanks. Over the last year, NATO allies in Eastern Europe supplied Ukraine with Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks that have been ground down or destroyed in constant fighting. Soviet-era and Russian-made tanks. Now, Ukraine, having been a Soviet satellite state and part of the Soviet Union, it was part of Russia, all of its military personnel being trained on Russian tanks. What do you think they're going to do with American tanks or German tanks, which they are not trained to operate? The Ukrainians know how to operate Russian tanks. That's all they know how to operate. The Ukrainians only use Soviet stuff, right? Until the last couple of years and until now. This is the first major influx of NATO weapons. And again, NATO has been training Ukrainian forces, but Challenger tanks, this is brand new. If they can't even use the tanks that they're trained to use, what makes you so confident they're going to know how to use a Leopard 2 or an M1A2 or a Challenger 2? Man, people train on those things for fucking months and years. Both of these home secretaries, okay, Suella Braverman and Priti Patel, both their parents came to the United Kingdom, and under their own laws as home secretary, they themselves would not have been able to come to the UK, to be born in the UK, and to have a life there. So, the hypocrisy is so disgusting, I got what I wanted, I'm okay, I'm secure, I can live in the UK, I'm the home secretary now I'm gonna shut the gates. Now I'm going to screw people that have literally nothing, that are so desperate they're, risking drowning in the Channel or the Mediterranean Sea. People have to resort to risking drowning. They have to resort to, hiding in trucks or swimming across the Channel, if everyone's ever done that, crossing the Channel because of her policies, because she forces people into doing that, right? So you literally have no choice. You have to be in the UK to begin the application. What are people supposed to do? Just teleport, for 5 minutes, write down the form and just get out of the UK? This is ridiculous. She's a liar, just like the one, her predecessor, Priti Patel. Why is Germany reluctant to give the Ukrainians tanks? That's a really tough one. I wonder why. Germany has long refused to send its most potent weapons to countries in conflict, a byproduct of its legacy of starting World War II and World War I. That's horse manure, because Germany does send weapons to countries in war. Saudi Arabia is one of them. So to get around this, the trick that they use is they don't sell the tanks and the ordnance directly to Saudi Arabia. They move it to Italy, and then from Italy they sell it to the Saudis. So they basically just insert a middleman, and that's how they get around this very, honorable principle of theirs, which they never abide by. If you go and you look up the Yemen war, I mean, you're going to see weapons from fucking everywhere. The Canadians have been selling weapons and making money. Britain, the US, Australia, everyone. And the Germans are no exception. So I mean, the idea is true, but they fucking send weapons. They goddamn do. They do.
Do you see how they move like snakes? Do you see how they move like snakes? They get the media to whisper in your ear, "Oh, don't go on strike. No, don't strike. It'll cripple the economy." Oh. No, it's not, like giving the army 800 billion to fucking bomb, 20 countries. That's okay. That money, we can spare that. But if you go on strike, oh my god, we're gonna lose like 2 billion a day. Well, we can't afford that. The Pentagon has been audited, I think 5 times now, and every single audit was failed. That means they don't know where the money's going. The Pentagon is like a black fucking hole that sucks trillions of dollars, and the government doesn't even know where the money's going. I can tell you where it's going. You don't need to audit the Pentagon. I can tell you, me, Richard Medhurst, that money is going towards drug deals, towards arms sales, towards arms purchases, towards CIA fucking budgets and embassy coffee. That's where that shit is going, man. That shit is going to the spooks. That shit's going to the bombers. That shit's going to the paramilitaries. That's where it's going. You don't need to scratch your head. That's where it's going. And apparently that's an acceptable loss. That's an acceptable use of American dollars and taxpayer dollars. But, you know, going on strike, oh, that's too much of an inconvenience. That's the fucking point.